What is going on, everybody? Will Ford here on the Storied Rivals Podcast Network. Stadium Drive Week 13, the regional semifinal round of the Ohio High School Football Playoffs. And this Friday, we're live at Thomas Worthington High School for a big matchup in Division One. The number 1 seed Gahanna Lincoln Golden Lions and the number 4 seed Upper Arlington Golden Bears. But we want to feature another game on our show this week. We're with a school that we cover in the Muskingum Valley League, Division 4, the Sheridan Generals, the number 2 seed, taking on the number 3 seed Bishop Hartley. If you look at the last couple of weeks for the Generals, first of all, they won in Week 12, Round 2, 42-0 against number 7 Gallia Academy. A huge performance defensively, and they really established the run as they have over the last handful of weeks. But defensively, they showed out, forced turnovers, and they got back on track because in weeks 9, 10, and 11, they've struggled a little bit defensively. They've given up 20-plus points per game. And in weeks 10 and 11 combined, they gave up 600 yards passing. It kind of riding the struggle bus a little bit defensively, giving up a lot of yards and quite a few points. But the offense has not wavered. They've performed. They've done their part to keep them in games and win them football games over the last 3 weeks. And now the defense finally back on track after that big performance, shutout win in round 2. But now they take on number 3 seed Bishop Hartley, who's very multiple in the things that they do offensively, a lot of talent defensively. And of course, the further you get in the playoffs, the better the teams are, right? More talented players, better coaching, better teams. That's just how it goes in football. The best teams rise to the top the further you get into the playoffs. There are no bad teams at this point. And there's not even any, not even any average teams at this point. This is all good football teams. And so we talked to head coach Paul Culver III here in this show. We'll hear from him in a minute or two. But what's at stake for both of these teams in this game for Sheridan and Bishop Hartley? The winner of this game will take on either the number 1 seed Steubenville Big Red or number 13 seed Indian Valley Braves. So that's on the horizon. That would be the regional final matchup against one of those two teams. But head coach Paul Culver III talked about the play and kind of the turnaround of his defense last week, peaking at the right time, offensively and defensively. What the film says about how he needs to prepare for this Bishop Hartley football team, offensively and defensively, and instilling positivity and confidence in his guys the further along they get into the playoffs, to not only continue to do what they do, but understand that this is the best of the best now. We're not going to go out and dominate teams like we did in the regular season. We have to go punch for these teams. When they throw a punch, we've got to throw a punch back. How does he instill that confidence, that belief, and that survive and advance mentality the further along you get into these playoffs? So here is head coach Paul Culver III of the Sheridan Generals here on Stadium Drive. Thanks so much for making us part of your Football Friday, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or watching on Facebook or YouTube. We really appreciate you being here. Weeds. All right, we're here with head coach Paul Culver III of the Sheridan Generals going into Week 13, the regional semifinal round of the OHSAA playoffs, and taking on number 3 Bishop Hartley this week. Coach, really appreciate your time joining our show. And last week, a shutout victory, 42-0 against Gallia Academy. And if you look at the way your defense played the couple weeks prior, giving up at least 20 points per game, quite a few yards. But your defense seemed to kind of get back on track, back to Sheridan Red Rage football, and you force some turnovers. Obviously, like you get shut out, like I mentioned. But does it feel like now that your defense and your team as a whole is back on track, back in a rhythm, and back playing the way you want them to play going into the regional semifinal round?
100%. I mean, when you give up 600 yards passing in 2 games and 50 points, that's not going to be successful on a regular basis unless you're, there are teams out there that can generate, more offense than that, but that's not us. We've always been like a defense and ball control possession offense. So yeah, that wasn't us for a long time. And it was fixable, right? So like the kids didn't panic, and to my defensive coach's staff credit, they didn't panic. And, just kept, the expression is Novocaine, give it time, it'll work. Believe in who we are. We might have to make a couple tweaks, and I think you saw that against Gallia.
Now, the run game, I feel like, has just been extremely prominent. You mentioned ball control, which is something that you favor. Like the run game, I feel like has just been so dominant and powerful the last handful of weeks. Like end of regular season, going into these playoffs, like Justin Munyon has just been running over people, and he's had tons of room to run. Caden Sheridan has really showcased his ability as a runner, not only as a thrower as well. And like Zach Hines, when he comes in, takes some carries. He's efficient moving the football. Like what's went into the offensive production running the football? Because obviously you're really strong up front. How we've been able to move people around and create those running lanes for those guys to make things happen.
Yeah, so a big part of it was finally just gelling offensively, especially up front. In a lot of ways, while we had some pieces back, we didn't really have a guy that was a returning, every down offensive starter back. Um, Jack Backus, or excuse me, Connor Backus and Jack Robinette, both saw time there last year and started different games, but they all ultimately were pushed into service because there were injuries. And so then you start talking Showalter at center as a first year starter. Cole Davis played only defense. Cole Davis is Cole Davis, so he could have played offense anytime we wanted him to. But and then Creed Hill has gotten a lot of snaps, and then Hunter Seitz is a senior that has stepped into that role. So we had a lot of injuries, and I I think only finally in the last 3 weeks have those guys played the same position 3 games in a row. We've had basically 6 bodies that have been in and out and moved around, and essentially all 6 of them were first year starters. And it took us a while to kind of really get on the same page. They still were playing hard, but when you start running an actual offense, the idea is that all the if then statements of what the defense could do to you. So if they, then we, right? And that's hard. That takes a lot of time. And so you started to see that in the last couple of weeks.
Now with this Bishop Hartley team, and really, the further you get in the playoffs, obviously, the better the teams are that you're going to play. Unless there's some massive upsets, which we have. I feel like we haven't seen a whole lot of upsets. For the most part, teams that were favored to win the upper seeds have been winning most of these games. But the further you get in the playoffs, the teams get better, and the games are harder. But Bishop Hartley's played some tough D2 teams on their schedule in the regular season. They beat a Saint C team that was 8-2 in the regular season last week, and they beat them by 2 possessions. But what have you seen on the film this week that you know that you've got to be prepared for that Bishop Hartley does offensively that'll challenge your defense once again, and then I guess same thing on the other side of the ball as well.
So my dad would have called it phone booth football. It's like pack everybody inside of a phone booth and just start trading punches because they pack it in, right? They still get on the perimeter and they have a lot of speed and they create big plays, but they are foot to foot splits. They regularly have two tight end sets or two fullback sets, and there's even some where you go pure heavy, which is 2 tight ends plus 2 fullbacks, and that basically means one tailback's running behind 10 blockers because the quarterback even throws blocks on some of their plays. So forcing teams to play defensive football that they haven't played in 20 years, right? Like nobody does this anymore. It used to be, this was not everybody, but it was common. You saw genuine smash mouth football. There are teams that think they're smash mouth. Like we like to say that we have a very physical run presence, but this is this is right out of the 1920s or something like that. And so, to their credit, they are really good at it. And my dad always said one of the things that gave us an advantage offensively for the option is most teams don't really run it. They think they do, but they don't. Right? And so teams can't prepare for us. And that's Hartley's advantage. Like seeing that kind of personnel groupings in the year 2023 is so rare that it gives them an advantage. You can't simulate it in practice, and you can't simulate the physicality. They're very good at it. And then defensively, they're just super aggressive, like athletes everywhere. So they pose a real challenge.
What have you been telling your guys each and every week? Like, each round of the playoffs, the further along that you advance, is it kind of a just survive and advance mentality? What do you get into what do you tell your guys? What do you try to put into their heads as you've moved further each round of the playoffs that to give them the confidence and the belief that no matter who we play, no matter what seed they are, no matter where we are, we can go out there and beat these teams week after week and accomplish the goals that we want to accomplish.
I've certainly used the expression "survive in advance," like you said. That's that's absolutely the goal. I mean, it doesn't matter if our defense gives up points as long as our offense scores more, right? It doesn't matter if our offense
Yeah.
plays poorly as long as our defense, does its job and shuts somebody out or something like that. But we also kind of changed maybe the focus. I'll be honest, like we think we're a pretty good football team. And so there were times this year in the season that we're challenging our defense that we expect to shut this team out. We expect to shut them out. If they score on us against our starters, then we've done something wrong. We haven't played to our capability. And then flip that around offensively, like we're going to score 35 points. Like if we don't score 35 points, on some level, we've failed. Our offense should score, 3 times in the first half, twice in the second half, or vice versa. Then depends on whether you get the first kick. That's pretty realistic. Depends on the pace of the game. But as soon as you get in the playoffs, it's like, look, they're gonna hurt us. They're gonna pop a big play. They're gonna daze us. They're gonna score. And it's not because we expect them to, but we want their kids to just be realistic that um, you're going to take a haymaker shot, right? And you grin through it. You get up off the mat and you throw one back. That's this next level football. There's no bad football teams left. There's no even just decent football teams left. Uh, maybe somewhere, right? But incredibly unlikely. Um, so you're going to take shots. The coaches staff know exactly what they're doing. So you have to play well and understand it's going to be counterpunching and and reacting from there. And so they can't get rattled from that. Sometimes I think you see that when you see a blowout in the playoffs, it's not because there was a wide gap in the ability. It's because that team could not believe that it wasn't going their way. They were 10-0 through the regular season, now 12-0 in the playoffs, and all of a sudden they finally met their match, and they can't handle it. So that's not our focus. Our focus is, look, this is a fourth quarter, 48-minute plus battle.
Coach, best of luck this Friday and get to the regional final, man. You guys have had a fantastic season, and it looks like now you're peaking at the right time, which is great to see. But best of luck. Go get a win. Keep moving on, man. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join our show as always.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate it.